Hi, today we are going to talk about developing reading skills for secondary students with Smart World Tiếng Anh 6. We're going to look at 3 different areas. Firstly, background to reading. Secondly, the 3 stages of reading. And finally, we will look at some useful reading activities. Now, reading is an interactive process between the reader with their background knowledge and the text that has its own linguistic features and meaning. Now, these two interact, and from there we have comprehension. So, reading is an interactive process that goes on between the reader and the text, resulting in comprehension. The text presents letters, words, sentences, and paragraphs that encode meaning. And the reader uses knowledge, skills, and strategies to determine what that meaning is. Now, there are 3 stages of reading. The first stage is before reading. The second stage is during reading. And the final stage is after reading. So, the first thing we're going to look at is before reading. Now, what should we have our students do before starting a reading activity? And why? Firstly, we should review the text features. What clues do we have about the text? We look for photos, captions, headings, and types of text. The second thing we look at is that we want to activate background knowledge. So we want to say, what do students already know about the topic? What do they think they will read about? What vocabulary will they encounter? And, if possible, what questions do they have about the text? So, before reading, we will look at the vocabulary that students will encounter while reading the text. And we can see from this example, we have army, king, soldier, and queen. So in your students' minds, they're thinking, this will be about history. So, this is our text. And what clues can you see about the text? What do you know about the topic? Do you have any questions you want answering? So you can look at the text. You can look at the title, you can look at the style of the text, you can read the instruction. We know that it's a movie review. We can look at the picture and we can see that it's about Quang Trung and he's riding an elephant. And your students may already know this story, so they have a good background knowledge to start off with. The third stage of before reading is to set the purpose for why we are reading. So, why are we reading? What will be the outcome? What do students need to do? So, let's look at the story of Quang Trung again and look at what the outcomes will be and what students need to do. So firstly, it says read Fung's movie review and fill in the blanks. Secondly, we need to read and write true or false. It's very important before you do any reading that you show your students what they are expected to do. The next stage of reading is during reading. Now, what can we do to increase student comprehension and ensure they retain more information? So, reading needs to be an active process. Too often reading can be very passive. We want the students to be active when reading. Students need to make connections between themselves and the text. So, before reading, we ask students to think about what they would read. Think about some questions they would ask. What do they know already? And part of the during reading process is to have students to look back at their before reading predictions. What did they correctly predict? If you remember about Chung, did they get the story right? Did they know what it was about? Were there any surprises in the text that they didn't know before? So, during reading, we want students to be active readers, and we'll look at some ways we can do that. So we want students to ask questions about a text, agree or disagree. We want them to connect the text to themselves and the wider world. And one great way of doing this is note-taking. Let's look at a text about Hanoi, the capital city of Vietnam. Now, we could read this, but actually I want students to be more active and I want them to make notes throughout the reading. So, some questions that we can get them to answer. Are there any new words to be defined? Except for the lesson vocabulary, are there other new words? Are there any questions that they need answering about the text? Is there anything they disagree with? What is their opinion? So if we look at the text, we can go through and we can ask some questions. So it says over 8 million people live in Hanoi. Well, that makes me think, how many in Ho Chi Minh City? We can agree or disagree. In the text it says that September to November is one of the best times to visit. Well, I disagree with that. I think March is the best time to visit. It says that Hanoi is one of the oldest cities in Vietnam. Well, how old is Hanoi? And it says we can see many beautiful traditional Vietnamese and French buildings. Now, I'm a student, I don't know what traditional means. So I need to highlight that and define what that means. And it says there that you can still find good and cheap restaurants. That makes me think, what is a famous food about Hanoi? And finally, it says you should definitely visit Hanoi when you come to Vietnam. And I can use this as a lead-in to describing my trip to Hanoi. Or I can ask my friend about their trip to Hanoi. So you can see, we use the text as a jumping off point to lead into many different things. And I think it's very important to make reading an active process in this way. So, we've looked at before reading, during reading, and now let's look at after reading. So after reading, students need to reflect on what they have read. They need to complete the set tasks. Remember, true or false, or fill in the blanks. And I find it very useful for students to summarize the text. So let's look at a text which is about Singapore or Kuala Lumpur. Which city is better? Now, as a follow-up activity after reading, I could do one of these activities. I could have my students create a table listing characteristics of each city. I could get them to summarize what the text says. Or I could get them to give their opinion based on the text. Which city is better? Maybe your students have visited these cities. What do they know? So again, use the reading as a jumping off point to engage your students and get them really thinking about what they're reading. Now, one great activity that I do that combines reading and also listening is called Listen, Read and Correct. Now, in Listen, Read and Correct, I will give my students a text. And you can see here this is a text about Can Tho, which is a city in the south of Vietnam. Now, in this activity, students will read the text and I will speak the text, but I will make some mistakes. Now, you can do different things with this. Your students can write down or underline the mistakes they hear, or if you want, when they hear a mistake, they can shout, "Stop, teacher." So, you can read the text and listen to me. Can Tho is a city in the north of Vietnam. It is in the Mekong Delta on the Hao Driver. Many people live in Can Tho. Lot of people visit it to see its floating markets and beautiful rivers. Okay, I'll stop there. Did you hear the mistakes? I said Can Tho is in the north of Vietnam, and I said it's on the Hao Driver. Ooh. And I also said lot of people visit it. So your students can listen for mistakes as they read along. I find that a very useful activity. So, to summarize, we looked at the 3 stages of reading. We looked at before reading, where it's very important to prepare your students for what they are going to read. You want to activate their background knowledge to engage them with the topic. You want to set out what tasks they have to do. And you want them to look at the text and get an idea and predict what they will hear. We have the during reading stage, where we want students to be active readers and not just passive readers. And the final stage is after reading, where you want students to reflect on what they have read and do activities to extend their learning, for example, summarizing the text. Okay, that's all for now. Thank you and bye.